Hi guys, it's Sophie and welcome to part 2 of my December wrap up. As I said in my first video, lots of books this month, so I'm just trying to get through all of them and actually give you a little bit of my thoughts on each one, because I don't just want to show you them all, that just seems a little pointless. So yeah, part 2. So the first one I have is The Weightless World by Anthony Trevelyan. I love this edition, absolutely love it. It's by, who is it published by? Gallery Beggar. And I think that their books are absolutely gorgeous. I'd really like to try and get a few more and do a review of their books in general, because I believe they publish only UK authors and sort of slightly less known UK authors. So it just gives you a little bit more exposure and it just seems to be really interesting, a really interesting house. The books are beautiful. I really enjoy the sort of foldy flappy things and also just the put together of the pages. It's just a really nicely put together book. But onto the story. So we have a story here about a man and his boss who go on a sort of journey to India, and they're trying to discover an anti-gravity machine. The boss is losing his mind to an extent and believes that he's found this anti-gravity machine that's going to pull the company out of ruin. And the main characters, sort of other higher up bosses I suppose, say that he's really not very well, but could you go with him anyway? We don't think there's going to be anything there, but we'd really appreciate if you could sort of babysit him for the trip, and we'll close the company down while you're away. So he agrees and he goes with him on this journey. There are some really interesting characters in here. There's a really strong female character who I really enjoyed. I liked how annoying she was. I liked that she was arsey and she wasn't sort of, she never sort of stopped being annoying throughout the entire thing, and I quite like that. I like that she wasn't sort of won over by anything. But yes, it was great fun. I didn't think I'd enjoy this as much as I did. I thought that it was going to be, because it is slightly lesser known authors, that it might have been something that wasn't all that polished. Sometimes you do get that, but it was really, really beautifully done and really nicely finished off. I'd really recommend this one to you, and as I say, my plan is at some point in the new year to try and get a few more of these books and review them as a bunch to give you a bit of an overview of the publisher itself. Oh, and I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, so the next one is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This one was a really mixed bag for me. I loved the writing and the way the author was playing with language, but the story had sort of hit and miss bits for me. So just as a sort of summary of it, you have a woman who has been sort of ousted from her community because she's been adulterous, and the child that has been born from that adultery goes with her. And that's Hester and that's Pearl. And their parts of the story I found really interesting, particularly the sections with Pearl. I thought she was a really intriguing little character, and this odd sort of devil-born child almost that everyone was afraid of. I thought that was really nice. I thought it was really good fun, and I think oddly it was quite a nice way to see how a child is developing without the influence of the society, so that was fun. The sort of reverend sections I just didn't enjoy so much, when he was going through his sort of moral turmoil throughout the story, so he's sort of suffering under this secret. I just didn't think it was as interesting. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I think the writing was lovely, and it was not a bad book in any way. I felt as though some parts of it were so interesting to me, and other parts I could just give or take, and I did find it hard going, switching between the two as often as it did. And the next one I have is I Hate and I Love by Catullus. This was partly brought on by, I think, A Secret History. They kept reading Catullus. I think that was the book it was. Someone somewhere, or perhaps it might have even been The Wave. Someone kept reading Catullus and I was like, oh, I need to read some, so I feel like I can sort of understand what's going on. So this is a collection from the ATP Classics range of some poems, and they are very mixed. So they're on lots of different kinds of topics, although sort of love forms a part, I suppose. And some of them are just really funny, but they were great fun. I think I didn't really see anything that was that erotic. I can understand how it is to an extent erotic. There are sort of people kissing people and sort of vague references to sex, but I didn't find it was anything particularly racy, but I suppose probably it was at the time. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. It didn't quite have 5 out of 5 star stuff in there for me. There was nothing in there that I hadn't thought of before, which is how I tend to do my 5 out of 5 stars. But it was good fun. I think this was probably one of my sort of more enjoyable of the ATP Black Classics that I've had so far. I think it'd be a nice one to read back over every now and again and just pick up those poems. There's one I particularly liked about teeth and about a man who has such white teeth that he won't stop smiling at all these inappropriate occasions, like funerals and wars, and they sort of take the mick out of him for his teeth. I thought that was nice, and I thought that one was fun. So yeah, I would recommend this one actually. I think it's quite a nice little collection. So the next one I have is Redeployment by Klay. This one was really interesting. It won the National Book Award this year, and I can see why. It's sort of short stories that are written about the Iraq War, and they are sort of, some of them are funny, some of them are really sad, really depressing, some of them are just dark. Some of them did teach me sort of something about the reality of war. I think they are really interesting, and I think it's a really valuable book in itself, just to explore the sort of modern warfare and the effects of modern warfare on the soldiers. I think potentially it might be slightly more impactful for Americans because it is very based in the American forces rather than in the UK forces, which would be my personal kind of interest. But obviously it's the same conflict and it would be similar situations, it's just the sort of like cultural references. But I did find it very interesting. There was one in particular called Psychops that I thought was really well done, which is about a man who's come back from the war and who sort of feels like he's kind of fine. He's not done all that much over there, but he has taken one kill shot. And he kind of feels like, well, you know, why would I make a fuss? I'm fine. But he starts making little jokes that would have been fine when he was out there, but when he's home, they're seen as sort of very racist, and they're seen as sort of Islamophobic. And he ends up being called into the sort of head teacher, the dean, I suppose, the dean's office to discuss the comments he's made to this other student. And it's about him sort of explaining why he doesn't think he's wrong in saying these things, and this Muslim girl explaining why she thinks he is. And it goes into his sort of experience within the war and the fact that he mainly worked within the psychological operations department. So he was trying to think of the most horrible things that you could shout over loudspeakers to make people run out so you could shoot them more easily. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. My main issue with it was that the characters became quite similar. I think the author didn't seem to really bring all that much out of the characters to make them seem like individual sort of people. There was more of a feeling of sort of soldier to all of them, which may have been a section of the book, I don't know. But I did wish I'd seen a little bit more of the personality of each individual. I could have quite easily sort of read them and assumed it was talking about the same person, and that sort of took away the 5 stars for me. But I think it was really, really interesting, and I would recommend you pick it up if you are interested in reading a little bit more about modern warfare and the effects on soldiers. Okay, so the next one is Cabin Porn. I've shown you this one before, but I just think it's absolutely stunning. It's just a collection of cabins and sort of homemade projects that people have, all different kinds. So you've got sort of classical cabins, you've got more architectural builds, you've got places like this which aren't sort of functional houses but people will use for certain activities. It also goes through in the sort of text. It speaks about how these projects have come about, who's been sort of involved in them, what sort of materials they used, and it was just a really, really interesting book. I think it's probably my favourite Christmas present, because I just think it's so interesting and just absolutely gorgeous. Like, each page is just something so stunning and it makes you wish you could dive into that world. Really lovely. I wish there was more of it, more pictures, and I suppose I could probably go on their website and try and, you know, dig my way through, but I would get completely and utterly addicted to it. So great fun. If you are interested in cabins and quiet places, then I would really recommend this book to you. It's really well put together and some beautiful photography in there too. Okay, and the next one is One of Us by Asne Seierstad. This is a story about Anders Breivik and about his victims in the Norway massacre. It is a book that I think is really well put together. I really like true crime. I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, true crime shows, read a fair amount of true crime. But I go through binges. I'll sort of read everything about one particular individual and then I'll move on. but this book is a really nice example of when true crime's done right. I think it was really well written. I think that the sort of perpetrator was explored without being sort of made into a hero figure. I think that the victims were honoured in exactly the right way. I think that in a way Simon, who was one of the victims who was explored more thoroughly, I felt as though he was more of a real person than Breivik was, through the sort of characterisation to an extent of this real individual. It was really well written, and I think that whilst there is still a focus on the violence, it didn't seem overdone. It felt like a necessary part of the story, as opposed to any kind of voyeuristic desire to see the horrible things that happened. If you do enjoy true crime, I really recommend you pick this one up. It's really lovely. It didn't make me cry, but nearly made me cry at the end. If you do enjoy it, then by all means, just have a read. It's a really, really well done piece of non-fiction. Okay, and the last one for this one would be The Box by Gunter Grass. So I understand that Gunter Grass is a really well-known German author, but I'd literally never heard of him before I picked up this book, so that might just be the translation that's not coming across, or my sort of naivety, I suppose, in German fiction. It's also the centre of a trilogy, so that was well done. And I think they're called the autobiographical trilogy, which is one of the reasons why I have so many problems with this book. I really didn't enjoy it that much. I felt as though the story in itself had a lot of potential. You have this box, this Afghan box, and it takes pictures of sort of the future and the future that might be. It also takes pictures of the past and things that were there a long time ago. Really lovely central concept, especially when placed in the centre of this family, and you can see how they all sort of develop and learn through this box. However, the style was really, really experimental, and I did have a problem with it. I'm not the biggest sort of consumer of dialogue. I much prefer sort of the descriptive elements to the dialogue, and this was almost an exercise in dialogue. And the other problem I had with it, that was just a problem that's insurmountable for me, was that it's written in a way that you have quite natural conversation. You have individuals speaking over one another, interruptions, sort of tangential conversations, but without any markers, any dialogue markers, and without any reference to who's speaking. So what you end up with is this odd feeling of being sitting in the corner of this room listening to this family chat when you don't know what they're talking about, you don't know who's talking. It's quite unnerving to an extent, and I just didn't like it all that much. It meant I had to work really hard to try and determine who was who, and by about halfway through I gave up and just said they're just interchangeable children, because there's 8 of them. But I think I could maybe try and read something else of his, but this just seemed so odd to me. It felt as though it was the kind of book that would be interesting to people who love him and his work, or to his family, and I didn't feel as though it stretched that far out of it without, even with the box, it just didn't carry itself, I don't think. So I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that is part 2 of 3 of my December wrap up. Sorry it's so long, I just have so much to say. Hopefully you don't mind too much. I'll see you in a sec in part 3. Alright, have a lovely day. Bye bye.